Thanks for having me, JMC. I'm going to take you through how to build a music startup without any startup knowledge. Which is something that I guess myself and my team learned the hard way. And I wish that there was someone at the beginning of our journey that kind of sat me down and ran me through a lot of the really common mistakes that people make and a couple of things that you should do to build a startup. So I'm assuming that most of the people in this room today are either thinking about it or have thought about starting a business. A startup is a bit different to a usual business. I can definitely attest to that. And today I'm just going to run through it. So cool. So the first thing that I want to just talk about is, hello, Jack. How you going? The first thing I just want to talk about is sort of the notion of a startup. So when you kind of think about a startup, you kind of think about, success stories, and you see Instagram, Facebook, Eventbrite, Canva, Spotify here. They kind of get celebrated for their highs and they get celebrated for the things that are good about startups. But what I definitely want to say is that a startup is actually more like a massive roller coaster, except the peaks are way higher, the lows are way lower. You're alone. You've got a jetpack attached to your back. And sometimes the ride is still being built whilst you're on it. And even when that's happening, sometimes the track isn't even there at all. So it's not a smooth ride. It's actually really bumpy and it's really hard. And this is a visual of myself and my team pushing through building a startup. This is literally what we look like all the time. It isn't the funnest thing we've ever done, but it is the best thing we've ever done. So before I get into a couple of things that we've learned along the way, first, what is Muso? So for those of you who don't know us, Muso is a live music gig booking platform. We connect venues and hirers to book gigs. And we've been partnered with JMC for almost a year now. So we've done some amazing work with JMC and it's been a pleasure to work with you along the way. Now, Muso from a beginning, we started out in random meeting rooms. We used to go to some universities that we didn't attend and just hijack their meeting rooms and just sit in there and do all the work in there. We worked out of a shitty office that had 4 glass windows. So it was like a hot box. We had fans going 90 degrees. It was just nuts. So we kind of hustled and we got to the point where we decided we wanted to quit our jobs, and we were all working professionally in different industries. We all quit our jobs and we decided that Muso is something that we wanted to do full time. We worked out of crappy little offices for about a year until we got accepted into what's called a tech accelerator. And that tech accelerator was called Startmate. A tech accelerator, just for those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically a program where they get a bunch of startups, put them in this program with each other. They surround you with the best of the best in the startup industry and they grow your business and you grow with them. It was one of the most insane things that I've ever done in my entire life. And Startmate is the best Australian accelerator. Overseas, there's accelerators called Y Combinator and 100 Startups. If you're interested in accelerators, check them out. There's also music tech accelerators. In the accelerator, it was probably the most insane period of our life. And during that accelerator, we actually launched. And this is the photo on the left is us launching. That is literally the moment when we clicked launch. Just letting you know, it's not a big red button that says launch. And then on the right is actually in our offices with 2 JMC students, Kimmy and Matt, when we did our first testing. So we launched, we grew 50% week on week. And from that point, we got to do some amazing things. We traveled to the US, we went to San Francisco, we met with a lot of amazing venture capitalists and startup founders in San Francisco, and we were able to start growing our business with some amazing mentorship. Beyond that, we actually were able to go to New York and New Orleans, embed ourselves in the live music culture there and really start to understand how Muso can be expanded across the world. When we got back, we pitched Muso to a room of 500 people, including a ton of investors. And we actually got to the point where we raised $1.5 million to fund our journey. So that got us to becoming a real company. And from there, we hired a bunch of amazing people. We're now a team of 14, and we are dedicated to building the live music app, the live music industry. Thanks, James. You're dope. from that point, we've done so many amazing things. We've showcased at Big Sound. We've done a lot of gigs along the way. We actually have had over 2,000 gigs. We've transacted over $600,000 for musicians, and we're absolutely stoked because what we're here for is to make sure that musicians get paid for what they do. But enough about us. Today is about how to build a startup. So I'm going to take you on a brief journey into building a startup, and I'm going to hit some basic learnings that I wish I learned along the way. And this is from someone who had no idea what we were doing. We literally, none of us had ever touched this industry before. I worked in marketing. I was an artist too. One of my co-founders was a venue manager and the other was a salesperson. So we're calling this a Muso masterclass, but I'm actually going to call it a Muso kind of masterclass, because I think that master implies mastery, which means we have mastered something. And I think the whole point of a startup is that you never master anything. You are constantly learning. You are forging a path that no one has ever gone upon. And if you're doing that, you have to learn. So you kind of never master it. You're always pushing towards it. And I think the main message I want to put out is that no one knows what they're doing. Literally no one in the startup industry knows what they're doing. And if they say they do, they're lying to you. I once went to a session with the COO of Canva, which is now $1 billion company. And he even said, I've got no idea what I'm doing. And the reason why we don't know what we're doing is because if you're truly innovating and if you're truly doing something different, then you're sailing into completely new waters. And in a way, entrepreneurs are basically explorers. Just like explorers finding new lands back in the day, we are going on a journey into places where no one has ever gone before. So you are learning on every single step of that way. And that is something that you need to prime yourself for. You will not master this. You will always find another problem. You will always find another thing to overcome. But just know that you're an explorer. And I think just adopting that mentality helps us get across everything. And in a way, a startup is actually just one big experiment solving a big problem. And the people within it are actually just scientists. And that's another way we identify as entrepreneurs are actually scientists. Because if you get down to the core of it, everyone's got a hypothesis of what they're trying to achieve. We've got something that we think is true, and it is our job to prove or disprove that hypothesis. So it is just a series of experiments. A startup is a series of experiments. So with that over and done with, let's just go through what I'm going to take you through today. A masterclass. Yes, I agree. That is awesome. So today is where I'm going to take you through the team, the problem. I actually really like the masterclass. I might use that. The solution, the vision, the execution, and raising money. These are really important things. And I had actually the three of us when we were founding this had no idea about any of this. We were just like, let's build a business, let's do it. And we just put ourselves into it. And yeah, I wish someone showed me this at the very beginning. The first thing is the team. Before I joined Startup Land and became a founder, I would often, and I'm sure most of you have done this, you throw ideas around with the people around you and you're like, let's build a business. And sometimes that's, at a gathering or a party with someone, and you might not actually know that person that well. It might just be an acquaintance or a friend. But the first thing I want to say to you is that when you're picking the people you're working with, when you're picking the people in the team, treat it like a marriage. It's actually almost more important than a marriage, because you're going to spend more time with your co-founders than you will anyone else in your life. Literally anyone. You will have more fights with them. You will have more breakups and get-togethers. You're going to have to work through so many different problems. You need to make sure that the person that you're working with is someone that you know well and someone that you trust and someone that you can work well together. So before you decide to take the leap on what could be a 10-year, 20-year journey, just make sure that you're comfortable doing it with the person that you surround yourself with. Tip one. Tip two, make sure that you've got complementary skill sets and make sure that you fit like a jigsaw puzzle. Because if both of you are marketers, then who's going to do the technology? Who's going to do the sales? When it comes to who leads the marketing team, who's actually going to lead that team? So if you're a tech company and you want to be a tech company, then make sure you have a technical co-founder, someone who can code, someone who can even understand how tech works. that's something we didn't do, and we learnt it the hard way. I've got a marketing background, Jeremiah's got a sales background, and Brandon's got a venue background. And we were building a company in a software company. So when we got to investment rooms and we got software questions, or when we needed to understand, how to make software-based decisions, we struggled because we didn't have anyone that knew that, who wasn't literate in being a tech person. So yeah, make sure that you think about what you're trying to create and have the people who complement each other in the best way to actually get that through. The second thing is the problem. So at the core of all great startups is a problem. So all great startups start with a problem, not an idea. So if you're leading with an idea, probably not the right way to start. You want to basically think about the world, think about the number of problems that this world has, and think about what a problem is that you are passionate about solving. Because every single product in this world has been created to serve the needs of a problem. Everything you eat is to solve the problem of hunger. Everything like video games is to solve the problem of boredom. Clothing is to solve the problem of warmth and protection. Uber solves transportation. JMC solves music education, and Muso solves the problem of booking gigs. So you have to think about a problem that is relevant to you. And most importantly, it has to be a problem that you care about. That is really important, because if you don't care about the problem when things get hard, it's going to become really tough. James has just sent a question through. What if you don't like the other person, however they are pioneering too, and could help exponentially? James, I might actually save that to the end, and I'll answer that, because that's a bit of a big answer. So if there's anything I can answer really quickly, I'll just shoot it into the presentation, and then any bigger questions I'll just leave to the end and then I'll answer them. So feel free to just stack a bunch of questions into this. So once you have identified the problem, so for us it was, booking gigs is really hard for a musician. It's hard to find gigs, and for the venue, it's hard to find a musician. Then you find a solution. So that at its core, that is what a startup is. You are a solution to a problem. What could a solution be? It could be a tech product. It could be a physical good. It could be a university. It could be a gig booking application. Your idea might solve a problem that has never been solved before, like Tesla, or it might make a problem a little bit better, like Airbnb or Uber, or a lot better, actually. So think about ways to solve this problem. That's really important. The next thing is the vision. This is something that we learnt, especially going into venture capital funding, and I'll get into venture capital a little bit later in the presentation. But when you're thinking about a problem, you need to actually think about the vision. Like, what, I guess the question, to be frank, is what will the world look like in 50 years? Like, don't think about what the problem is right now, because that's only relevant for right now. Like, what is it? Like, zoom out. What is the problem in 50 years from now? That is what you need to be thinking about. Like, what is the world going to look like in 50 years? We're probably going to have glasses with augmented reality. We're probably going to have chips in our brain that give us information. We're probably going to be able to instantly translate people as they talk to us. Cars will be driverless. Cities will be completely automated. The world in 50 years is going to look crazy, and you need to have an understanding of what you think the world is going to look like in 50 years. For Muso, when we were looking at what the world would look like in 50 years in our industry, for us, we were seeing, Netflix is allowing for content to be delivered to your house, so people are staying indoors. Uber Eats is literally delivering food to your doorstep. TikTok is trapping people's minds and just soaking them into their phone. We kind of looked at that and we're like, well, the entire world seems to be becoming really digitized. And in 50 years from now, it might feel like we're in a vortex where we're actually stuck indoors. So that is what we thought the world would look like in 50 years. And I guess the second question is, what will the world look like in 50 years with your product or your solution? And so to us, it was, well, our vision then is we want to make sure that experience is a thing in the future. Experience is really important. And our vision is to make sure that in 50 years from now, when you go into a bar, when you go into a club, when you're walking down the street, there are experiences that will absolutely blow your mind, experiences that you've never even thought of before. So we kind of landed on a vision so much bigger than where we are. So that's really important. Think about where your company is in 50 years, because that's really going to help you articulate the startup. It's going to really help you articulate where you want to go. And a quick example of that is a company called Zoox. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of Zoox, but they're actually an Australian founded company. An Australian founded this. And the even crazier thing is that that Australian was a designer. He was literally just a graphic designer. He walked into the office of Blackbird, which is a massive venture capital firm in Sydney, in Surrey Hills, kind of close to your campus, and presented them a vision of what the future would look like. In the future, in the mornings, all these driverless cars will go into the city, drop people off, they'll go off and charge. There'll be not many cars in the city during the day. All the driverless cars will come and pick everyone up, take them home. The roads will charge the cars as the cars drive. Cars will not have seats facing forward, they'll have seats facing inwards. He was able to articulate a vision of the future that completely blew people's minds and captured the attention of everyone around them. And in the end, he was an amazing storyteller. So he went into the office of Blackbird and convinced them to believe in him to build a company that will actually result in driverless cars. Blackbird said to him, okay, mate, we understand that this is a great idea and we actually bought into the vision. You need to find someone that can actually help you do this. You need to find a co-founder that can build this. And that goes back to the team thing. He was a designer, he could design stuff, but he needs someone who can actually build a driverless car. So he flew to San Francisco and went straight to Stanford and went to the head of the autonomous vehicle company in Stanford and sold him this vision. And he actually was able to convince that professor to quit his job and join Zoox. And that just shows the power of storytelling and the power of a vision that is much bigger than that. I've been to Zoox's office in San Francisco. It is the craziest thing I've ever seen. There's like 1,000 people on laptops just smashing out work next to a car manufacturing plant, next to a driving course. And there's like driverless cars just like driving around, and it's just mind blowing. Just recently, Zoox just sold to Amazon for $1.2 billion. And that was founded by a designer who literally had a vision. So have that vision, find out what that vision is. I'm telling you right now, it's actually not easy to work out that vision unless it's really clear for you. This is something that came to us so far down the line when we were in San Francisco, talking to venture capitalists there. And once we were able to articulate that, we were able to sell people on what we were trying to do so much easier. Cool. That's kind of the front end of it before you even think about doing anything. The next is the execution. I once got told, yes, James, absolute space age stuff. And yes, I want a Back to the Future jacket as well. That sounds ace. So the execution. So I once got told that an idea doesn't mean it. An idea isn't worth shit. It's all in the execution. I mucked up that sentence. I apologize. It used to say an idea doesn't mean shit. It's all in the execution. That is actually pretty true. Every single person can have an idea. I'm sure heaps of people had an idea about Uber before Uber started. I'm pretty sure people had an idea about Airbnb before Airbnb started. But the difference is the execution. It is actually all into how you do it. I think that is a Rick Sanchez quote. That's who I got it from. So you need to ask yourself the question, how can I do this? That is so important. Like, you could come up with an idea and it could be the best idea on earth, but if you don't know how to execute it, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything at all. So you need to ask yourself, how can I do this? And there's a few things that we kind of learn along the way that I can share with you that teaches you how to do that. So the first thing is start small. If you try to go after a massive market immediately, you're probably going to fail. when you're kind of sitting around with friends and thinking and brainstorming and thinking about what a startup is, you naturally kind of gravitate to the biggest thing possible. And if you try and launch that big thing, you're probably going to fail. An example of this is Facebook. If Facebook launched right now with everything that they've got, so social media, marketplace, chat, groups, events, everything, it's going to be really hard to actually communicate what Facebook is. And it would have probably failed, because if I was trying to say to you, hey, James, come and join Facebook, it's like this chat thing and like a social media, but then there's also this marketplace and there's also these events and stuff. It sounds confusing and it sounds hard to actually get a grasp of. And if that's a new product launching into a market, it's actually going to be really hard to convince people to join the platform. So you need to start small. You need to pick a niche market, because anything else is really unsustainable, not just for convincing people to jump onto your platform, but it also helps in being able to manage and execute on something that is actually achievable. So start small. We went too big when we started. We went after the personal hire market, which is like 21st birthdays and weddings and venues. And even on venues, we went after every single type of venue we could think of: cafe, restaurants, clubs. And the more and more we worked, the more and more we realized that we shouldn't have done that. We should have started at maybe just restaurants or maybe just bars. And if we became the booking platform for bars, we would be able to build slowly from there. So start small and build out. Just like Facebook, they started as a social media network for Stanford only. Then they became a social media network for other universities and so. And then as they kind of grew, they added in all these other features into what they are today. And that's a really good segue into my next point, which is the MVP. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the term MVP before, but that stands for minimum viable product. Minimum viable product, in short, is what is the least amount of work that you can do to prove something or prove a hypothesis. And the reason why you want to create an MVP, or you want to do the least amount of work, is because you want to limit wastage. If I say I want to build a chair, I'm just making this up as I go, a chair with, a Back to the Future jacket, air conditioning thing that shoots me up into the sky and I can get to the moon. If I go and spend billions of dollars and build that chair and then try and sell it to someone and nobody buys it, then I've just wasted so much money. But if I want to work backwards and do the most minimal amount of thing to prove that, then I can start to prove a case that that is actually worth doing. So an example would be, I'd buy it too. An example would be creating a flyer of that chair and going out and giving that flyer to people and being like, hey, do you want to buy this? And putting them on the wait list. That is literally the most minimal viable thing that you can do before you actually go off and build. You want to make sure that you're proving things before you build anything. At Muso, we didn't do that. we built the Taj Mahal. We literally thought of every single nuance in our product that we could get to. And we spent hours and hours and months trying to work out the most perfect product, build the perfect product, and release the thing at exactly the same time. That's actually not how you're meant to do it. Instead of building that, we should have done brochures for the Taj Mahal. And then once the brochures started gaining traction, we should have built a small exhibition room for the Taj Mahal. And then once that starts gaining traction, building foundations. So you really need to get to a point where you can prove that people actually care about the things that you're building. And you need to do it in small incremental gaps. And as people start to react to your product or start to react to your features, that's when you double down. If something works, that's when you actually start moving on it. So do not feel the need to go out and build the entire product. Think about the smallest thing you can do. So I think, I don't even know what that means. I think that, yes, exactly. Yes, I know what that means. Yeah. We gave birth to a mature person rather than a toddler that needed to grow up. Yeah. So I think I'm just going to skip past that. What you need to do is you need to look for goats trails. And this is what we say all the time at Muso. That path that you can see going around the corner, that is something that has cost money, concrete, labor. But actually, as you can see on the left-hand side, people don't want to take the path. They actually want to go down the goats trail. So we wait until we can see goats trails before we can build a path over the top. So we build the minimum viable product. We build something small. We wait until there's evidence of that something small being used, and then we double down on it. And we keep doing that until we get to a product. And the way that you do that is you need to listen. And this is one of my favorite videos. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this video. You really, really, really need to listen to your customers. You need to get down in the pits. You need to get in front of them, and you need to understand what they like and what they don't like. Because in the end, and backtracking 2 slides, people really need to care about what you're doing. And in order for you to make sure that you're getting something or creating something that people care about, you actually need to listen to them, and you need to build for what they want. If you build something that you think is important, or our version of the Taj Mahal, and ship that, and no one comes to it, you haven't built it for anyone else but yourself. So you need to make sure that you're listening. The next thing is to do unscalable things before they are scalable. So once you have launched, or once you've put something out in the market, you need to make sure that you're getting down on the ground and doing things that might not seem sensical, but are integral for the success of the business. So Airbnb, when they were founded, the founders used to go to a bunch of people's apartments themselves with cameras and take photos of the listings for that person on their behalf. Then they would go and upload the photos for that person into Airbnb and make sure that everything was done for them. That is not scalable. Like, you can't, if the founders were still doing that for every single listing on Airbnb now, they would be screwed. So you need to make sure that you're prepared to do the unscalable things. When Muso started, we knocked on almost 400 doors. Well, we didn't even knock. We walked into 400 venues across Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Auckland, Edinburgh, London, and tried to sell the idea of Muso to them before we even had a product. So be prepared to do this. And another way of saying this is hustle, but I really don't like the word hustle. The next thing is be comfortable being uncomfortable. I think with this, what I was saying before around, an entrepreneur as an explorer, you're pushing yourself into somewhere you've never been before. And you will never there's no textbook out there that can help you with that. So you will pretty much always be uncomfortable because you'll be doing things you've never actually experienced. But that is important in terms of, growth of the company, but it's also important in terms of development as a person. If you can do something when you're comfortable, then when you're uncomfortable, then you're going to absolutely excel at something when you are comfortable. So an example of that is when we were pitching our business at the Startmate demo day, which is this event where you get up in front of about 500 people, including a lot of Australia's biggest venture capitalist investors and other investors. We got Jeremiah, our CEO, and the guy who pitched, to pitch Muso at a train station. And that was fun. Is my screen still sharing? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I was just looking at it. I couldn't see the box around it. So we got Jeremiah to pitch at a train station before the pitch in front of randoms on a platform, just to make him really, really uncomfortable. So when he got to the actual venue in front of 500 people, it would be easy. But we weren't really happy with that. We actually got him to pitch on a train carriage as well. And that's a clip from him on a train carriage pitching to a bunch of people he's never met. And the funniest part about that is there was actually a venue manager on the train who came up to us after, and he's now a client of Muso today. So heckling is a really good marketing channel. But getting Jeremiah to pitch in a really, really uncomfortable format meant that by the time we got to the demo day and pitched in front of a massive crowd, Jeremiah nailed it. So make sure that you're comfortable being uncomfortable. The last thing I want to say in this execution phase is that your idea will likely change. And this is something that we didn't realize. I mean, when you kind of start up on the journey, you have a vision, you have an idea, and you might be really committed to having that idea be seen to fruition. But the thing is that a lot of startups change over time. For example, Groupon used to be called The Point. And the purpose of The Point was to get groups of people to rally around a cause together in like a chat situation. It didn't work that well when it was launched. But one thing that they found, which was really interesting, was that one of the groups was excelling. And that was a group to get a group of people to pull together to get group discounts on purchases. So they saw that that works. They were like, okay, well, this is The Point, but this particular sample of people has worked really well. So there's something in getting groups of people together for discounts. And they ended up going that way. And as you can see, so the MVP philosophy, they moved down in towards the group discount area, and they ended up creating Groupon. So another example is Wrigley's, the chewing gum company. When Wrigley's launched, they were actually a soap and baking soda company in like 1891 or something like that. They used to give their clients pieces of gum that were produced in the same factory. And over time, people actually became more interested in the gum and wanted the gum. So when they realized that, they actually discontinued their soap and baking soda and went ahead with gum, which is just crazy because they started as a soap and baking soda company, but ended up as a gum company. And I think the best graph to illustrate this is this. It's called the J curve. And if any of you want to read a really good book that outlines the journey of a startup, you should read the J curve. It's essentially a map for how startups can operate. So I only recently read this and I was just laughing internally because it was just so in line with what we had experienced, but we didn't realize that we were on this journey. So the J curve is basically split up into 6 stages. The first is create. So you create an idea. The second is release. You release it out to the market. And then you go through the MVP cycle, or as others call it, the lean startup cycle, and you morph. And morph is all about listening to your customers, listening about what's important to them, and moving in the direction of your customers and not building too much. So for Wrigley's, they released as a baking soda and soap company, and they listened to their customers, and their customers were saying, well, actually, we love your gum and we really want more of that. So they morphed into a gum company. So in the morph phase, that's where you kind of morph the business into what it might actually be. Because as I said, we're scientists. So when we're creating something and releasing it, that's our hypothesis. Our hypothesis is that a gig booking company will work, but is that actually the case? Will that actually work? And a hypothesis is designed to be proven or disproven. That is the book. Thank you, JMC. A hypothesis is designed to be proven or disproven. So you might disprove it, but also prove something else that you didn't even think was possible. And that's where you morph. Once you've morphed, then you can model it, and model is business model. Like, how do you actually make money off this? And then once you work out how you can make money off it, and you've got a product that people actually care about, as I said before, that's really important, then you can start to scale. You shouldn't start scaling before you morph. You shouldn't harvest before you morph. You shouldn't model before you create. This is actually like a really good map. What we did is we created, we released, and then we went straight to scale. We tried to sell the very first version of Muso into a lot of different places, but actually what we didn't realize is that we had a lot of work to go. We had to still morph the company, and we started as a massive company for all of these different venues and personal hires and all these events. And over time, we realized that we're actually a hospitality tool and a gig booking tool for musicians. And just recently, we've learned on the venue side, at least, that we're actually we're more likely going to be a venue group tool. So creating software for venue groups to hold gigs, which artists can then apply for. So that's the J curve, very important. The last thing is raising money, and this is the I guess the glamorous bit. And when you kind of think of raising money, you know, you might get visions of luxury yachts or mansions or whatever it is. It's not like that. Raising money happens when you decide that you want to speed up the rate of your startup, how it's growing, or you might raise money to actually produce the startup in the first place. But the first thing I want to say is that funding is not always the right answer. You need to think about whether it's right for you. There are so many companies out there that are absolutely successful and didn't take funding. One of the best examples of that is Atlassian, which is literally just the shining example of Australian startups, and they did not take any funding at all. That company was completely bootstrapped. So funding is not always the right answer, but it does help you grow significantly. But before you get into the raising room, before you get into the pitching room where you're pitching to investors, which we did a lot of, so if anyone's got any questions about that, I'm more than happy to answer. You need to know what you need to raise money. So you need that idea that I mentioned. You need proof that the idea works. So you might have done an MVP. That MVP has resulted in a few transactions, and you've got a vision of how that can grow. Or you might just have a vision of how the world looks, and you've got a really strong plan and people who have complementary skill sets to execute on that plan. I think, yeah, in terms of when you're actually walking into the room, you can't just walk in there with just an idea. That's never going to work. Funding avenues. There's actually a few different funding avenues that you can go down. So the first is bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is funding it yourself. So putting your own money into it. It's termed bootstrapping. That's what we did. We didn't realize it was called bootstrapping, but that's what we did at the very beginning of Muso. The second is friends and family. You'll often hear people refer to a friends and family round. And when it comes to funding, it usually happens in rounds. I don't know, I personally don't recommend that because, you know, people always say don't do business with friends and family. It is a risky one, but if you truly believe in your idea that it is a viable way to go down. The third is angel investors. Angel investors are basically really high net worths, people who have a lot of money, who have done really well in their lives, and they've got capital that they want to deploy into different businesses. Ryan, I'll get to that at the end. So angel investors are a little bit different. They're a lot more patient than venture capitalists. They are more passionate investors. So they'll usually invest in things that they care about. So we do have angel investors that have invested into Muso, and they really care about live music. They want that to succeed. So they might not hit you with all, the funding projections and the big things that you need to present to institutional investors. And that leads me to my last point, which is venture capitalists. So venture capitalists, or VCs, are professional investors. This is what they do. So when you get in a room with a VC, think about Shark Tank, times that by 20. That's basically what it's like. Actually a lot less intense than Shark Tank. But VCs they invest in businesses that they think are going to become billion-dollar businesses. They won't invest in companies that will only become a successful-ish business. You need to prove to them that you can be making about $1 billion or $1 million or whatever it is, a very large amount of money in a short period of time. Because what they do is they invest in a bunch of different companies, knowing that a lot of them are risks. Maybe 8 of them won't succeed and 2 will succeed really well, and that will pay back all of their investments across everything. So yeah, that's just a really quick download of funding. Again, it's not integral to success. Absolutely, it's not. But it is something that a lot of startups do, and I just felt like I should address it in this. So that leads us to the end of just a really, really intense, quick download, and I hope it wasn't too much. And I would have liked to have put a lot more in there, but if I was kind of summarize everything, that's what I would have gone through. But the last thing I want to say is this is the hardest thing you ever do, or the hardest thing that I've ever done. You will be tested at every single turn. There's always another dip. There's always another high. some days you might have the best day of your life, and then the next day you might have the worst day of your life. It might happen within the day. So you need to be persistent, and you need to make sure you get through. And sometimes it might feel like you're doing this, and that has definitely happened to us before. But I guess the mentality that we have is the obstacle is the way. So whenever an obstacle presents itself, that is now the way that you must go. Like for us, when we see a problem, we see that as an opportunity to create something better. So anything that faces you, you have an opportunity to move past it and be creative in the way that you move past it. Everything that you do along that way will be a learning lesson, and you'll come off the other side of that obstacle being a much better person. Another way of saying that is failure is the most important thing because it teaches you the lessons that you need to learn. So just keep that in mind, that nothing is too big. There is no obstacle that you can overcome, that you can't overcome. And we've definitely learned that. There's definitely been times in our history when we thought something there was no way we were getting past it, but we did. And we did with persistence. But with all of that, this will be the best thing that you ever do. It has been the best thing that I've ever done. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I've learned so much. It's been really stressful. I've lost a lot of hours of sleep, but the result of what we've created has been so fulfilling to watch. And I think, I said that this is a not so masterclass at the beginning of this. I think that's really important to note again, because we are nowhere near being successful. Muso is nowhere near it. We're nowhere near having been a master. We're still learning every single day. We're still on that voyage. We're still explorers. We're still scientists. We're still pushing every single day. So it's a constant learning curve, but is one of the best ones that I've ever been on. And that's it. Any questions? There are a few questions here. Thank you for the claps. There are a few questions here that I'll quickly answer. And if you've got any questions along the way, we've got 7 minutes left on funding or building a startup or anything, just feel free to chuck it in here. Okay, what if you don't like the other person, however they are pioneering to and could help exponentially grim and bear it out or seek new help? I'm going to talk from personal experience here. So this don't take this as solid advice, but I would go and find someone else, because it is literally, you're locked in a room with these people for hours and hours and hours and hours and years. And if you don't like that person, it's not going to work. And you're going to create friction in that. Our co-founders, myself, Brandon and Jez, at the very beginning, there was a bit of friction, but we were mature enough to work out how to overcome it. So we're very open with each other. So either don't work with that person or work out a way to be able to work with that person by being really candid with them, by being really straightforward with them and letting them know how you feel. That's what I would say to that. But in the end, yeah, it is like a marriage. And I actually have seen friends of mine who have started startups. A few of the startups in our cohort for the accelerator broke up because they didn't get along. And as I said before, this is the hardest thing you'll ever do. The stresses that you experience building a startup, you'll never experience with anyone. And the higher the stress, the more stress that you've got on yourself, the more emotion can come in. So you want to have level-headed people around you. And I'm really lucky to have Jeremiah and Brandon as my co-founders, because they've been an absolute rock through that. What would you say? Would you say it's smart to continually morph to adapt to what customers want? How do you know when to draw the line between changing your company and sticking to your original idea? Yeah, I would just so I said at the very beginning of this that, it's a series of experiments. And if the results of one of those experiments is giving you a positive indication of where to go, I would absolutely go down that direction pretty much 100% of the time. That's me personally. Sometimes, I guess, if you started as this company and you're morphing towards a company that you didn't want to build, I understand that can actually be quite hard. And I know of instances in the past where people have started to do that and gone, I don't want to do that. But I guess the bigger question in here is, if something that you're doing isn't working, if it's not working, is there any point in actually continuing that, in terms of, I've tested this multiple times and this as a startup, or this is an idea, isn't working, but this peripheral thing is. To me, I would actually go for the thing that is working. So startups are always morphing, but there is a point. Like there is a point where you go, aha, this is it. And the morphs become slower and slower, smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So I don't actually know if there's ever a case where you're just continuously morphing always into a different product. You kind of, from my understanding and my experiences, you kind of start in one area and you might end up a little bit away from it or really far away from it, but it's not like you're going to be jumping around and changing the company all the time. So Ryan, I hope that answered your question. Karen, g'day. How much further does Muso have left to go? How will you define ultimate success? A long way to go. Yeah. So right now, Muso is operational in Melbourne and Sydney, and Brisbane. We want this to be a global company. In order for this to be a global company, we need a product that can scale. Because we built things in an MVP format and kind of hacked it together, our product is nowhere near ready for that scalability. So there's a lot of product work that we need to do. There's a lot of business work that we need to do. There's a lot of client acquisition work that we need to do. We are still morphing. We are actually still trying to truly work out what the company is in its ultimate. We are pretty much 95% of the way in terms of the morph. Like, we know what we are as a company. We're not going to change significantly, but there's a lot of work to do in terms of building products, in terms of getting us into other markets, in terms of potentially in the future building other subsidiary products. We have spoken at length with musicians, including a lot of JMC musicians, about the troubles of the industry in terms of musicians. Right now, we're solving the problem of gigs, but we know that there are so many other problems out there for musicians. And, you know, whilst we're starting at gigs, we know that we want to eventually start helping musicians in other ways and venues in other ways. So just like Facebook started as a social network, but that ended up moving out into, you know, events, chats, marketplace, everything else. We want to do that. We want to grow into a global company. So yeah, if we were like to draw a map, we're literally at the beginning. And it's crazy because if I reflect on that, it just feels like I've been doing this for so long, and it's just been the craziest journey I've ever been on, but we're at the start. And when I talk to founders who are ahead of us, who, you know, might be at 20 people, 20 staff members or 50 staff members or 100, they always say it doesn't get easier. And it always makes me just shudder a bit, but they always say to me, no matter how far you get, there's always more to get to. And the problems are going to get bigger. So Karen, I actually don't know what I define as ultimate success yet, because according to people who I see as successful, they're not successful yet. So it's a bit of an open answer, but I hope that answered that. Any more questions? There's 1 minute left.
Yeah, I got point 1, the team, point 3, the solution, point 4, the vision, but I didn't get point 2.
The problem. So point 1, the team, point 2, the problem, point 3, the solution, point 4, the vision, 5, the execution, and 6, funding, if you want. Funding's in if you want. Cool. And any other questions? Cool. Well, I'm sure my email will be circulated. So if you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to shoot me an email. More than happy to help you. We do actually have an internship opening with JMC. I'm not sure if I can talk about that, Karen, but if you want to apply, we're looking for an intern to join our marketing and operations team. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely apply and jump on board. Yeah, I guess, you know, the last thing that I want to say is good luck. If there's anything that I can say to you is that I recommend this. If you're a little bit crazy, I definitely recommend this. It is the best ride I've ever been on, but make sure that you're checking those boxes that I've kind of gone through before you get to it. Read the J curve, read, yep, there's my email. Read the Lean Startup. I'll send over a few books to read before you get into this, but make sure that you're doing your research before you jump in. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you.
And hopefully I can do another one of these soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. See ya.
Thank you.
No worries.
Good luck.
Oh, thank you.
So you talk last year. It was actually really, really interesting. And I'm so glad that you're presenting more, because this actually, what happens is you become more unforgettable because you're giving information that's so helpful. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for that. Yeah, I hope you've seen a difference in what I presented at the start, like a year ago, versus what I presented now, because God, we've grown so much over the last year. It's been absolutely insane.
Yeah,
thank you for that.
Background knowledge, like you giving us information about how you developed, what the obstacles and where you've taken the company, and also I think that there's so much worth in when people give classes like master classes. The takeaway is people want to improve their lives, and they, in being part of like a conference or anything like that, it enriches their lives. So it's through the generosity of people who are lecturing. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It was my absolute pleasure. I kind of went into this and I was thinking, if I can help anyone, like one person, not make some of the mistakes that we made, then that's a win for me. So I hope that helped at least one person do that.
Yeah, I hope they acknowledge you at their Grammy Award winning. And they're like, yeah, this dude told me years ago. Yeah.
Stop it. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. And hey, if you've got any more questions, just shoot me an email. You've got my email down there now.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Vanessa.